Hello, I'm Shreya Sinha. I'm based at the University of Reading. Today, I will be presenting work from research that I've done over 3 years while I was a postdoc at the University of Cambridge. And I used to work at for the Tigris project. I was part of the flagship project one with collaborators in the University of East Anglia, in ICRISAT India, in MSSRF in Pradhan, and in Lok Chetna Manch, also in India. And my talk today will be focused on the theme of work and labor in Indian agriculture, insights for socially just and sustainable agriculture systems. So the outline of my talk will be as follows. I will start by talking about why work and labor in agriculture are important in thinking about a policy agenda for sustainable agriculture. I will then talk about the flagship project one, our research sites, our questions and methods. A greater part of my presentation will then be about the key findings in relation to this theme. So in particular, in relation to crop production, it will be about women's work both on and off the farm, and then a little bit about off-farm work. I will end by talking about the implications for policy of, in relation to questions of work and labor. So why is labor and work in agriculture important? So we find that in both research and in policy making for agriculture, the question of land and land ownership is paramount. So discussions are often focused on land productivity, or the conceptualization of farmers is linked to whether or not they own land. But in fact, there is a much larger population and community that depends on agriculture in quite different ways. And so an expanded understanding of agricultural work and labor is quite necessary if we are to understand who are the stakeholders in articulating a sustainability agenda. So by this expanded understanding of work and labor, I mean both appreciating different types of work, so agricultural, allied, and household work, but also who does the work. And this could involve the landed, the landless. It could be distributed by caste, by gender, ethnicity, but also possibly age and religion. So as part of the flagship project one, we conducted research across 5 different field sites across India. So this includes the Batinda block in Punjab, the Bhaisia Chana block in Uttarakhand, Chakai block in Bihar, Atmapur block in Telangana, and Sirakadi block in Tamil Nadu. And of course, you would notice that these are all based in very diverse agroecological regions of the country. And this also therefore reflects in the kind of analysis that we make. So the questions and methods that we used for understanding work and labor included firstly a focus on practices of agricultural production, where we tried to understand the relation between land and labor, how labor relations compared both in relation to farm and non-farm activities, and what was happening with technology, and how this differed across, of course, caste, class, etc. And we had a particular focus on the role of women in agriculture. So just trying to understand what kinds of work they do, whether that's empowering, and what are the sort of trends of women being involved in agriculture. We used a range of different methods to do this research, including focus group discussions, semi-structured interviews, and participatory methods. So what did we find? So just starting off with what kind of work exists on the farm, I think it's important to appreciate that, of course, there is crop production, but that the crop production is seasonal, and the nature of the seasonal production differs a lot across different regions of the country. So of course, here I've taken the example of 2 different field sites where you can see that the mix of crops that are used in the 2 main agricultural seasons, that's Kharif and Rabi, so the monsoon and the winter crop, are quite different. And then there is there are other kinds of activities on the farm, so specifically around sowing or land preparation, weeding, harvesting, and and the kind of work that is then involved depends on the level of mechanization that is prevalent in any particular region. And then who does this work in different regions is a much more complicated story, and I hope I will be able to bring this out in the next couple of slides. So just thinking of labor relations in relation to land. So of course, there is a diversity of land ownership patterns in different parts of the country. It's not just a question of the agroecological region. So if one compared our field site in Punjab with other field sites in Uttarakhand, Tamil Nadu, or Bihar, we find that in Punjab, there is a dominance of medium and semi-medium land holdings, while in the other places, the dominance is of small and marginal land holdings. Similarly, in some places, land holdings, it's consolidated. In other areas, it's sort of parcellated, particularly say in Bihar and Uttarakhand. Access to irrigation also differs. So all of these affect the kind of labor relations that exist. Of course, there is one component of farm work which takes the form of farm management, which is common to all all landowners and farmers, and this includes, of course, labor hiring, supervision, decision making around inputs or harvesting times and so on. And here again, there is a bit of a variation. Larger farmers will tend to be sometimes sometimes they will tend to work only as farm managers, while in other cases, in the case of smaller farmers, they would be both farm managers and they would do laboring work on their own farms. Of course, the degree and type of mechanization and labor use matters, but the type of crop also matters. So not all crops require the same kind of laboring work. So as a result, we see a huge range of labor relations in agriculture. Labor can be employed daily, for example, for spraying chemicals, or seasonally. So for example, for harvesting, labor could be hired on contract. There could be household labor. There could be labor that is hired through kinship relations. And labor for agricultural work can be both migrant and non-migrant. And this laboring work can also often intersect with caste, ethnicity, religion, and gender. So it's not uncommon for rural labor to be belong to a caste which is considered lower than castes that are land owners. A particular emphasis of our work was on women's work. And here it's important to understand that a lot of discussion on women's work has happened in relation to the phenomena of male outmigration. We can see that in most of our field sites, men are migrating for work while women are not. So this kind of trend of male outmigration has led to the burden of work increasing on women, and they have to take charge of agricultural work. However, in recent years, there's also a trend of defeminization, because some of the work that was done by women, for example, the harvesting of paddy, has now become mechanized, and combined harvesters do this work. So there is a kind of simultaneous sort of feminization and defeminization of agricultural work that is happening. And of course, with the impact of COVID, we find that women are, as men have come back, are staying back in the villages because of kind of the economic slowdown, and they aren't migrating. It's the women that are now getting displaced from agricultural work. Nevertheless, we do want to point out to some important trends and components of women's work as it exists in agriculture. Of course, in production, they have to undertake a range of farm operations, but the way they do it can often differ in different field sites. So in the kind of mountainous state of Uttarakhand, where land holdings are parcellated, women can be so overburdened that they often end up leaving far off fields barren, and say that they don't cultivate it at all. While in a state like in the southern state of Telangana, women are sometimes able to arrange farm labor from other villages if they have labor shortages. So there is a bit of variation around how this actually plays out. A similar thing can be seen in relation to post-harvest activities as well. So in Tamil Nadu, we find that women are able to sort of engage in bargaining for better wages in consultation with men, while in South Bihar, we find that women are in fact completely dependent on the men for decision making regarding kind of marketing, even if they are the ones who are actually doing the work. And so this kind of variation in experience is important to bear in mind when thinking about how to kind of address the challenges that women face. And of course, women are also in charge often of the allied activities, for example, caring for livestock, for collection of non-timber forest produce. And this activity is actually crucial for supplementary household income and for food security. Women also, of course, do a lot of the household work. And I think this is important to remember because I think I think this is work that is very important for the social reproduction of the household, and it should not be divorced by thinking. It should not be divorced from thinking about sustainable agriculture. The social reproductive work is equally important to kind of social justice, to how sustainable agriculture is for different households. And in fact, we find that environmental degradation increases the kind of time that women have to put into collection of water and cooking fuel. So these relations of women with the environment also need to be thought about in thinking about forward-looking policy agendas, and this kind of challenges has also led a lot of feminist scholars to propose the idea of time poverty and the lack of well-being among women. I want to say a small word about off-farm work. So there is, of course, a range of different things that rural people, men, but also sometimes women do off the farm, and this can include work in urban areas. It can include petty businesses. It can also include work that they do as part of the National Rural Employment Guarantee scheme. The important thing to remember, though, is that this forms such a large part of the livelihoods of many rural households that one needs to think about why they need to do all this off-farm work. And that's more obvious. That's because of an agrarian crisis, lack of employment, not enough returns from agriculture. But it's also important because for us to think of off-farm work in terms of how that has changed perhaps how these households feel about agriculture, how they evaluate their stakes in agriculture. And any agenda for sustainable agriculture in future cannot ignore this sort of large empirical reality. So I just want to conclude with some implications for policy. I think the case that I've made in this presentation is that one needs to think beyond land ownership to understand who the stakeholders are in a sustainable agriculture agenda. And by this, I mean that we need to think about sustainability of what and for whom. There is a difference in thinking about, sustainability of agriculture versus thinking about sustainability for agricultural households or for rural households. And when we frame the question in these terms, the questions of social justice become very important, by which I mean inequalities, thinking about inequalities around caste, class, gender, ethnicity, so on and so forth. There are, in fact, very diverse ways in which people are dependent on agriculture. Seasonality is paramount, and this should feed into policy agendas for sustainable agriculture. And in fact, perhaps what we need is a package of policies that not only looks at productivity and diversity of cropping systems, but also looks at things that are not technically, or the rights of women as farmers. I think things that are not technically considered part of agriculture. So employment guarantee or, social protection. I mean, when you think of women as farmers, one also needs to think about, questions of patriarchy. And so there's a package of policies that needs to be, adopted for a sustainable policy agenda, and there can't be a single point focus looking forward. Thank you for listening to me. And yeah, I'll be happy to take questions in the panel.